Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us and welcome to Central Park. My name is Ryan and I'm a guide for the Central Park Conservancy. Thank you so much for joining us today. We know that getting to Central Park is still pretty difficult for a lot of people. So we want to continue bringing the park to you through a series of different 45-minute long virtual programs held on select weekdays and weekends, as well as our more informal 15-minute weekly walks every Wednesday at 12:30. Thank you for joining us today for a weekly walk of the Reservoir. We're going to be together for about 15 minutes today, and all the photos you're going to see, with the exception of just a few, were taken by myself here in Central Park over the past week. We're going to be together for about 15 minutes, and we're going to have a lot of fun enjoying the spring beauty that is popping all along Central Park, but especially nearby the Reservoir landscape. Now, as you may know, I'm a member of the Central Park Conservancy, and our mission here is to keep the park clean and green, but especially to preserve and celebrate Central Park as a sanctuary from the pace and pressures of city life, enhancing the enjoyment and well-being of all. So we are using Zoom, which I'm sure a lot of weekly walk veterans are familiar with. If you want to say hello, use the chat box, let us know where you're joining us from, and also keep an eye on the chat box for links to upcoming virtual programs like our Cherry Blossom store. If you do have a question, please use the Q&A feature, and my colleagues Ian and Jose are going to be on the back end answering any questions you might have. Last thing you'll see pop up are going to be some visitor polls that I'll launch throughout the walk today. And once everybody has voted, I can share the results. Now, we're going to be taking a weekly walk today of the Reservoir, an area we visited once or twice in the past, but one that we haven't really visited in springtime yet, which is arguably the best time to visit the Reservoir. The Reservoir, which has a little bit different of a name today, was at one point an integral part in the Croton Aqueduct system, a system of water that delivered clean, reliable drinking water to New York City. This reservoir was built between 1858 and about 1862. While it doesn't serve the same purpose that it used to, it does really offer an important piece into Central Park's landscape, and we'll talk a little bit about why it still is so important. We have a pretty long distance to cover today and a lot of cool things to show you. So let's jump right into our walk, beginning on 84th Street and 5th Avenue, just north of the Metropolitan Museum. So as we enter just north of the Metropolitan Museum, we're going to enter on a lesser used entranceway to the park because we're walking right along a road at first. But we don't have to walk down too far to already get into the sunshine and see more park-like views. As we walk along the north side of the Metropolitan Museum, we're going to get embraced by the sun, and we get to also look over that nice large glass space of the Egyptian wing in the Metropolitan Museum. As we make our way up the sunny path, we're going to already start to see colors popping up here in Central Park. And as we make our way just a few feet up, we're going to be hit by this wall of color that we have to stop and admire. While we take a peek over here, we can see one of my favorite trees to bloom in the springtime. It's called an Eastern Redbud. Eastern Redbud have these little buds that remind me of slippers or little chili peppers. Really beautiful color added to the landscape. If you joined us last week for Pilgrim Hill, you may remember a botanical term I mentioned called cauliflory. Kind of sounds like cauliflower. Cauliflory is a botanical term, which means that these plants or trees bud from not only the branches, but even the trunk. And we can see little chili pepper looking type buds sprouting out from this Eastern Redbud tree. One of my favorites to view here in the springtime. We're also going to see other color around. Just below that, we see a really beautiful native flower that pretty often is considered a weed, but these dandelions are really important for early pollinators. Not only are they pretty to look at, but they offer a nice little food source and pollen source for a lot of early pollinators. And if we actually look a little closer on this dandelion, we can see one of those pollinators. You see what I'm referring to? Pretty hard to see, but if we zoom in a little bit, we can see a little ant crawling around. And of course, everything from different types of bees to butterflies to bats pollinate, but also things without wings like ants. So we can enjoy this little critter we might have not even noticed if we didn't take a closer look. And we can continue walking up the path, keeping our eye open for other cool discoveries. As we start to cross the road up here, we're going to come up to a little bit of beautiful color existing in some of the trees of this lesser visited landscape. And as we walk closer, we can see some of the beautiful magnolia trees, which are just starting to really blossom now here in Central Park. You can see a few different species, like these star magnolias, which have a nice, thin, narrow white petal, and certainly add a little almost cloud effect down here on the ground. As we turn just behind us, we can see another type of magnolia tree starting to blossom, these being saucer magnolias. Coming a little closer, we can see how much larger and how many more petals really exist within the saucer magnolias, which are just starting to open up, adding a little bit of a purple kind of pink fade to these flowers as they bloom, giving us a nice little treat right before we come up to the reservoir. As we come up, I do want to launch our first poll. I want to see just if anybody has had really a chance to visit Central Park yet. I know on these walks we have a wonderful crowd from all over the world, so I know a lot of people probably haven't had the opportunity to visit Central Park yet, but I want to get a gauge as to who has visited the park maybe this year or even just last year. So I'll leave that poll up for a couple moments as we continue walking. And as we travel up to the path, we're going to come up to one of the 3 bridges we can find surrounding the reservoir area. More of an arch than it is a bridge because it is going over land rather than water. But as we come up, we can enjoy the ornate cast iron sidings of bridge number 24. Most of the bridges and arches in Central Park received a number and a name, but the 3 around the reservoir just have numbers. We come to the side, we can see the profile view of bridge number 24. Originally, there were 7 cast iron bridges created in Central Park, but only 5 remain today. And 3 of those cast iron bridges you can find surrounding the reservoir. We're going to see my favorite cast iron bridge a little bit later at the end of this walk today. But as we make our way back up to the path, we see a little visitor stopping by. Popping by right in the branch in front of us, we can see one of our migratory visitors, a palm warbler. Looks a little something like this. That's not a picture that I took. But these palm warblers are one of about 33 species of different warblers that will stop in the park during springtime, during spring migration, and later in fall migration. They're really fun to see, and we rarely get to take pictures of them because they move around so fast. This little bird, like many, poses for a quick moment to give us a nice little treat, and then just like that, jumps off and is gone, nowhere to be seen. It's nice to appreciate these visitors for the short time they're in the park, and of course, enjoy the beauty of the different yellows, oranges, even reds that we see these birds having. As we say goodbye to our little palm warbler and keep walking up, we're going to come up to the South Gatehouse of the Central Park Reservoir. This building was constructed around 1864, and at one point, this building would serve a function to send water down to Lower Manhattan to the receiving reservoir that once existed where today's Bryant Park and New York Library were, allowing this to really control the flow of water. But as we come up along the path, we are going to be walking just along the reservoir, which is today known as the Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis Reservoir. This 1 billion gallon reservoir at one point was used for water for New York City, but eventually would become decommissioned around 1993. This landscape could have potentially been lost, but luckily it was kept around, and it would later in 1994 receive the name Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis Reservoir to honor one of our neighborhood New Yorkers, Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis, as well as to honor this landscape being saved, just like Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis helped with the saving of Grand Central Terminal. And while this doesn't supply water for New York City today, it does provide a home for countless different birds, fish, and different types of aquatic reptiles like this little turtle we can see here. A lot of use can be seen in terms of wildlife around this landscape. And as we continue walking around, we can admire that, again, 1 billion gallon, 40 feet deep reservoir, which adds a little bit of solace to this landscape as we walk around. And as we start continuing, we're going to bear just off to our right and start walking on this path called the Bridal Path, which originally was used for horse-drawn carriage or horseback riding rather, but today is more often used for walking, running, and of course, enjoying the beauty of the reservoir. Still get beautiful views of the water, and we can also start to see some beautiful plants blooming. If you visited the reservoir or visited Central Park anytime this year, you may have made your way up to the reservoir to check out some of these beautiful blossoms. And as I share the results, I see a lot of people have actually had the opportunity to visit. About half of the group with us today has had a chance to visit Central Park. For those that didn't have a chance to visit yet or visited in 2020, we're happy to be showing you the park in real time and making sure that you get to see some of the beauty that'll only last for a short while. So as we continue along, we are going to come up to one of the main reasons that people come to the reservoir in the springtime, the beautiful cherry blossoms. These beautiful Yoshino cherry blossoms add a beauty to both the visuals as we walk by, looking up in the sky, as well as down on the ground. Looks like we have a nice springtime snowfall blanketing the path, adding a little bit of beauty to every angle that you look. And as we walk by, we can see people indulging in the act of enjoying cherry blossoms, which, as I mentioned last week, is called hanami, and really just means to picnic or enjoy the beauty and simplicity of these plants, as we can see some people are doing on the bottom left over here. These plants are super beautiful. They have about 5 petals for the traditional Yoshino cherry blossoms. And while I can't go into the whole detail about these cherry blossoms, you can find out that information on our cherry blossom virtual tours, one of which is happening tomorrow and another on Sunday. But we can enjoy the beauty of these Yoshino cherry blossoms as we walk by, as well as enjoy the beauty of other perennial plants that are springing up, like different types of daffodils, which add a little bit of extra life to these landscapes, which already are blanketed in beauty. As we continue walking down, we're making our way about halfway up the east side of the reservoir. And of course, we're gonna see plenty more cherry blossoms as we go. We're making our way up along this bridal path, which is running parallel to 5th Avenue, as well as Museum Mile. So we can see cool museums and buildings like the Guggenheim just off to our right. As we keep walking up a little bit though, we can come to some other type of beauty, like this giant elm tree, which is arguably one of the most beautiful in the park. And while of course today, everybody loves to see the beautiful ornamental plants like cherry blossoms and magnolias, it is important to remember how beautiful and important these native trees are, because native trees offer a much larger benefit to the native environment. A cherry drupe, which is the non-edible fruit produced by a cherry tree, maybe supports about a dozen or less insects. The fruit that is produced by an elm tree, the samaras, can support upwards of 500 different insects, which is why we tend to prize native plants in the park today. Walking around, we can come up to this entrance of the park where we can see a beautiful little memorial. This memorial is for a gentleman known as John Peroy Mitchell. At 34 years of age, he was the 2nd youngest mayor, having served a mayoral campaign from 1914 till 1917, and unfortunately dying in 1918. He does have this memorial here at an area called Engineers Gate. And if you want to find out why he sits here at Engineers Gate, you're going to have to come to our cherry blossom tour either tomorrow or Sunday to learn the full history behind this area. But as we continue up the path, we can take a moment to go enjoy the expansiveness of the reservoir, seeing that fountain that's located in the southwest corner of the Central Park Reservoir. And if we look just over to our right, we can see again the expansiveness, but also where we're going to be walking to, near that North Gatehouse, which is where we'll end our walk today. As we bounce back onto the bridle path and continue walking up, we can certainly see plenty of people doing the same thing we're doing, enjoying the beautiful cherry blossoms, which will only be around for a finite time. As we continue walking down, we can see again more Yoshino cherry blossoms, but we also notice some aren't fully in bloom. And the reason these trees aren't in bloom is because this is actually a different species of cherry blossom known as a Kwanzan cherry. Kwanzan cherries are largely filled in along the west side of the reservoir and offer a really beautiful pink bloom. We can see them just slowly starting to open now. I actually want to launch a second poll right now. I want to see if anybody has maybe a favorite cherry tree to see around the reservoir. There can be a few different species found, primarily Yoshino on the east side, and then Kwanzan on the west side. So we'll let everybody vote in that as we continue. And as we make our way up to the northeast corner of the reservoir, we'll get some nice open views. I like these subtle views where we get a little bit of beauty in terms of trees and a lot of open area to view. As we continue up, we can see plenty more spring blooms like grape hyacinth. Grape hyacinth was always a favorite of mine as a child. I used to like to pick these and throw them around. But of course, now I understand the importance of not picking flowers. If we all picked a flower, there'd be none left for everybody to enjoy. So it's best we enjoy them by taking pictures and living in the moment with them. As we continue walking down, we're coming up to that northeast corner and wrapping around some different type of towering trees like these London plane trees on our left. As we walk along, we can bear up just to the left and go back up to the path surrounding the reservoir. As we come up though, we do want to be careful because it is a running track, so we want to give the runners the right of way. As we come up though, we can see some of my favorite views to see. Just again, a little bit of a beautiful view with trees and blooms, as well as a really expansive look over the landscape. As we walk along, we can enjoy the beauty that the reservoir serves today, but we should always remember how far we've come. About 20 to 30 years ago, you would have seen a very ugly, large fence surrounding the reservoir. Unfortunately, this fence was what you would be running around and enjoying the beauty. We eventually see this being taken down and actually being replaced around 2003 when a restoration was done. During that time, some of the original fencing from the 1860s was found and replicated to give us the beautiful fence that we have surrounding today, which is much less obtrusive. Here we can also see where we've made it to the opposite corner of where we started initially near the reservoir, seeing that south gatehouse or south pump house in the back view of this photo. And as we continue walking around, we'll come up to the north gatehouse, which again, today doesn't serve a purpose in terms of really generating water for the Croton aqueduct system, but it does serve a purpose in terms of offering a beautiful and private little nest for birds. Many different birds certainly use this area. And as we continue walking just up the path a little bit, making our way to our final location, we will get the opportunity to start looking back at this gatehouse. As we look back and come around the path, we can see that, of course, it's being occupied by many different species of wildlife. Zooming in, we can see two double-crested cormorants, another migratory visitor, perching right on the corner, really giving this building new use and new life. As we start to make our way past these cormorants, we'll come up to our final location today, which will be arguably my favorite cast iron bridge, but more technically an arch here in Central Park. As we make our way up, we come to bridge number 28. Bridge number 28 has a better known name today, which is the Gothic Arch or the Gothic Bridge. Certainly a beautiful piece that sits right on the northwest corner of Central Park. And like many different things in Central Park, this was not always taken care of and actually did need to be restored. Originally being created in 1864 by one of the designers of Central Park, Calvert Vaux, and teamed up with Cornell Ironworks, this beautiful bridge was created but was worn down over time. It did get restored around the 1990s, I believe, providing the beautiful cast iron bridge, or again, arch, since it's going over land that we see today. One of my favorite areas to either start or end our walk around the reservoir. And I do want to share that last poll, and no surprise that Kwanzan cherry trees, the bright pink ones, tend to be a favorite of a lot of people. They certainly offer a lot of beauty, and they can largely be found starting from about this point down along the west side of the reservoir. So if you do want to come see the beauty of the Kwanzans, if you get the opportunity, this bridge number 28, otherwise known as the Gothic Arch, is going to be a great spot to enter and start your walk around the reservoir. And everyone, as you can see, sorry, I forgot to share. Now we can see everybody largely voting for the Kwanzans. But certainly this view is a beautiful one where we can see plenty of spring blooms existing along the bottom and a great way to end our walk today. I want to thank everybody for joining us. Here again is the route that we took. And while right now you might see still some Yoshinos in bloom, in the coming weeks, we're going to see Kwanzans taking over this opposite side of the reservoir. So whatever area you walk around the reservoir, there's certainly plenty of beauty to behold. I want to again thank everybody so much for joining us, and I want to really encourage you to join us either tomorrow at 3 p.m. for our Cherry Blossoms tour, where you can learn a lot more about the different types of cherries, a little bit about the history of these areas we had to kind of rush through, and enjoy the beauty of these pictures that we were able to take. If you can't make tomorrow's Cherry Blossom tour at 3 p.m., we do have another one on Sunday at 12:30 p.m. And of course, plenty of other walks. Like on Tuesday, April 27th at 3 p.m., we'll have a Northern Forts virtual walk. And of course, the following Wednesday, we're going to have another weekly walk. And join us next Wednesday as we celebrate Central Park's about 163rd birthday. Next week's weekly walk actually falls on the anniversary of the Greensward Plan, which is the design of Central Park. So really cool tours and walks ahead of us. But check the chat boxes and you can find the links for the upcoming programs that we're going to be offering. As always, I want to thank you so much for joining us and encourage you to again stay involved with Central Park, whether it be in person or virtually. But thank you so much for attending these walks and giving us great things to talk and show about. I will leave this open for a few more minutes, so if anybody does have any last minute questions, please feel free to ask those and I'll jump on and answer them. But from all of us here at the Central Park Conservancy, stay safe, be well, and we'll see you soon.